Hello, and thank you for joining us for this webinar Wednesday. My name is Sharon, and I'm with CIPA, your Colorado Government Authority, helping you get more information and services online. In today's webinar, Allyant will be showing a demo of their CommonLook PDF and CommonLook Online tools used to make your documents accessible. Before we get started, please go ahead and turn on captioning if you need or desire, and note that during this webinar, you are muted. If you have any questions or would like to communicate with the presenters at any point during the webinar, please use the chat box or the Q&A feature. We will have you raise your hand at the end and we'll unmute you then so we can answer any remaining questions that we have at that time. We'll also have a poll question for you to answer at some time during the presentation, probably near the end, and a post-webinar survey, and we deeply appreciate your feedback, so thanks for taking all those. Please join me in welcoming Account Manager Amy Waldorf, Account Executive Mark Lind, and Trainer Avery Heimel from Allyant. We appreciate their time and look forward to their presentation. Also on the call is CIPA's Sales and Marketing Director, Beth Justice, Customer Success Director, Dwayne Tucker, Sales Operations Manager, Heather Nelson, Operations Assistant, Sarah Fisher, and our new Digital Accessibility Specialist, Josh Schroeder, if you have any questions for us. Thank you again for joining us today. And with that, I will turn it over to our guests.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sharon. Hello, everyone. Josh, welcome to the team. I think this is the first time I have gotten to interact with you, and I guess, it's in a large group setting, but great to have everyone here. Thank you so much for taking the time to spend an hour of your Wednesday learning a little bit more about Allyant. I know that we have quite a few people on the line. So like Sharon said, please use the chat, raise your hand if you have questions. We're going to be giving you a ton of information today, which is great, but also want to make sure that we slow down and answer any questions as they come up. We are ultimately here to make the most of this for y'all. So in terms of our agenda today, I am Amy Waldorf. If you are already a CIPA grant winner, then I am your account manager. And hopefully you have heard from me. We have worked together. I'm sure there are a lot of familiar faces and names here today with us. So I am your point of contact. I am your front door to Allyant, so to speak. If you need anything, if you have questions, if we go over anything today that you're like, whoa, that's not familiar to me, how do I get access to and use that tool, or any other questions similarly, let me know. I'm here to help always. So we're going to be talking about our 3 tools that are available through the CIPA grant: CommonLook Online, which I will be demoing for us first, and then we're going to have Avery, who is a member of our training team, demo CommonLook PDF and CommonLook Office. So you will get to see all 3 softwares that we provide through the CIPA grant. Before we get into that, I really quickly want to share a little bit of information on the renewal. So anyone who has signed up for the CIPA Accessibility Grant should hopefully know that the grant runs through April 30th of 2025. So you've got about 5 months left in the grant. Once that expires, it will be up to you and your entity to decide whether you're going to renew those licenses, and if so, how many of them you want to purchase for the year following. They will not auto-renew. We're not going to trap you into paying for this, so no need to worry about that. But just keep in mind, especially as people are wrapping up budget for next year, that you do want to be budgeting for the ongoing support of your accessibility efforts, because I assume that everyone will end up making documents next year, which is why we're all here learning how to remediate them. So that being said, come April 30th, 2025, you will have the option to renew your licenses at the 70% discount of $938 per license suite. That's going to include access to all of the softwares we're talking about today: CommonLook Online, CommonLook PDF, and CommonLook Office. It also includes access to training and support. So you get free access to our pre-recorded trainings, free access to our live trainings. You have access to me as your HB 211110 expert to make sure that you are tracking in the right direction. We also have a flat rate fee for remediation included in that, and then free access to Procure Ensure, which is our tool to test your vendors and see if they are accessible enough for your constituents. So that is the renewal information. If there are questions about that, please feel free to reach out to me or reach out to CIPA. You will be hearing more about this from us if you haven't already. I know I've sent out some emails and reminders, but you will be hearing more about this. We will not let it sneak up on you, but if there are questions in the meantime, just let us know. Okay. This is kind of our ending slide, but we're going to switch over into the demo. And so I'm going to actually stop this stop this screen share really quick so we can come back to it. So really quickly, before, as I'm pulling this up, one thing, I feel like a broken record mentioning this over and over again, but it is so important. So one thing to keep in mind is you should already have an accessibility statement on your website, and that statement should be updated quarterly with the progress that you've made against your accessibility goals. This is the most important part of HB 211110. It really doesn't have anything to do with the demo that we're about to talk about, but it is the most important part because it's going to provide you a little bit of legal cover so that you can't get sued for what's on your website. So if you have questions about the accessibility statement, if you don't already have an accessibility statement up, please reach out to me after this so we can figure out what we need to do to get you moving there. All right, that being said, I'm going to go ahead and dive into our first demo, which is going to be our demo of CommonLook Online. Those of you who have been with us from the start may know that CommonLook Online is actually something that we added to the grant just a couple of months ago. So originally it was just CommonLook PDF and CommonLook Office. We heard from a lot of you that CommonLook PDF does have a steep learning curve, and that is true. It is a power tool. It can remediate really complex issues and do a lot of fine tuning in your documents, but we recognize that it can be a little laborious. So we wanted to create a machine learning based version of CommonLook Online or something similar to allow you to remediate your documents with less effort. So if you haven't signed up for this, please reach out to me. I will send you the link. You do have to sign up for it separately, but it's no additional cost. As I log into CommonLook Online here, this is going to be the dashboard that greets me. As you can see, I can see how many documents I've remediated, how many accessible PDFs I've ended up with, and just some kind of quick information on the dashboard here. Before we dive into transcriptions and I start transcribing a document, I always like to show the support tab down here because you can come directly from the platform. It's very easy to use, but sometimes there are questions or issues or little bugs that you run into. So from the platform, you can come to the support tab and you can either submit product feedback. Our accessibility grant winners are currently our only customers that have access to this version of CommonLook Online. So any feedback that you have for us is actually really valuable and probably will lead to a solution. So I encourage you to submit feedback. You can always submit product training questions directly to the training team here of, I'm trying to find this button or I'm trying to remediate this specific thing and I'm having difficulty, and they will email you a response. And then if you run into any technical issues, bugs, you're not able to do what you're trying to do in the platform, you can reach out to our support team here as well. So quick note on that. We're going to go ahead and come into transcriptions and we're going to start to remediate our first document. So I'm going to click Start New. And it is going to ask me, what do we want to remediate today? So I'm going to go ahead and grab my demo doc, and I'm actually just going to drag and drop her in here, and it is going to upload that into our cloud. I'm going to hit next, and it's going to ask me, how do you want this document to come out when we're done? Accessible PDF is the only option, which is good news because that is exactly what we want. So I'm going to go ahead and hit next, and it's going to start evaluating the document, extracting the elements, doing all of the tech things that are above my head. And we are going to get to a point where it says, okay, I looked at your document, everything looks good. I have extracted a lot of the information. I've begun tagging. I've started to understand what's in the document, but there are a couple of things that it wants our help on. It is machine learning. It's not perfect yet. So we're going to get in there and we're going to help it out with the things that are confusing. So I'm going to click next. It's going to bring me to the document, and it's actually going to highlight the issues involved in this document. So the first thing is we have unidentified content. If I hover over this unidentified content error message, it's going to highlight in orange all of the content that wasn't tagged, wasn't identified. So no big deal there. We're just going to want to go through and tag it. And one thing it didn't highlight was my logo up here. So that might be the first thing that I want to deal with. I'm going to deal with these two issues, and then we're going to come back and actually do the logo in the full document review. So I am going to say, all right, my unidentified content we have here. This is Jefferson County Planning Commission hybrid hearing meeting agenda. This to me is the title of the document. So just like if I was in CommonLook PDF, I want this to be in an H1 tab. So as you saw, I just draw a box around the text or the element that I want to pull into this tag. I'm going to click on it, and it's going to say, okay, what kind of tag is it? I get to choose. Am I dealing with a paragraph? Am I dealing with a list? In this case, I'm dealing with a heading. What kind of heading? An H1. As a reminder, and I'm sure Avery will go over this as well, every document should only have one H1 because it can only have one title. Everything below that should be an H2 or an H3 in kind of the subheadings category. So as you can see, we've already got a little snag here because I've got an H1 down below. We're going to deal with that later. We're going to leave that for now. I also have this unidentified content here. I'm going to drag a box around this. This is just kind of some of the details. I think that this is going to be an H2. This should be kind of the second thing here. And then lastly, we've got our instructions for the webinar. This is, it gets down to, frankly, a little bit of your judgment on how you want to tag your document. To me, this is probably going to go in an H3 tag because it feels like that third level of heading where we're getting into headings over the actual information and text of this document. So I've dealt with all of my unidentified content now. Everything is tagged in the correct heading tag here. So I feel good about that. There's still a couple things, obviously the logo, the H1 down here that I want to fix, but I'm going to have an opportunity to do that in a second. So I'm going to leave that for now. The last thing that it identified and wants me to take a look at is my suspicious paragraph down here at the bottom. So oftentimes when there is a link or sometimes an italicized word, there's another document that I use frequently that has a Latin name in it. It will identify that as suspicious content. But actually it is totally fine the way it is. So we can leave it in a text tag rather. So I have fixed the issues that have been brought to my attention. I can also scroll to page 2 here, and I can see there's one more issue it wants us to identify here. So if I hover over it, we have unidentified content. And again, this just feels like the same H3 that we used on the previous page. So I'm going to go ahead and let it know that's an H3 as well. Okay. Everything is tagged. If you have questions about how we've gotten to this point, put them in the chat so that I can address them. But I'm going to say, all right, I feel good about this. Everything is in a tag. There's some things that I probably want to go through and clarify, but fortunately, CommonLook Online has a step built in to do that. So if I go ahead and hit next, it's going to say, hey, we're done with your document. Let's do a full document review. You can toggle this on and off. I recommend never toggling it off. Just leave it on. We're going to want to do the full document review. This is how we get that last pass at our document and make sure everything looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and hit next, and it's going to take me back into my document and say, all right, this is what things look like. First things first, I don't like that this logo didn't get tagged. So I'm going to go ahead and drag a box around it. It's going to ask me, what is this logo? I'm going to say it's an image, and it's going to say, okay, great. Let's get a description for this image. Now, theoretically, this is a logo. It is not necessarily conveying information. So you have the choice here to say, actually, I just want to ignore the image. It's not conveying any information. It's not detrimental to my screen reader user if they don't know what the logo is. And so I can just ignore it and the system will artifact that for you. For the sake of the demo, I'm just going to go ahead and say Jefferson County logo. And go ahead and put that in there as my image description, and that is what the screen reader will read for me. So now I've got my logo tagged. I have my H1 here, my H2, and my H3. All of that seems logical to me. We're following the right order. And then I have text here, text here, text here, text here, text here. These all look right to me. These are all paragraphs. And as you can see, they are all in that TXT paragraph tag. So that looks good. The next thing down here is this H1. I actually don't think that this needs to be a header at all. To me, this feels like a continuation of text. So I'm going to go ahead and put her in a text tab just by clicking on my tag here and choosing text. As you can see, it's easy to just click in and choose which of these this is. So I get to make that choice. I get to tell the system, hey, I actually just want you to tag that as text. I have my H3 here, and then we have this listed as a list. I actually think I would put this in a text tab. I keep saying tab. I think I would put this in a text tag because this isn't a true list. So it's going to affect the way it's read out, but it is just kind of it's just contact information. So we're just going to put that in a paragraph tag as well, in a text tab. Lastly, we have another H1 here. This should actually not be an H1. I think this should go, it matches the font and the size of the H3 we have here. And of course, we can only have one H1 per document, so we know it can't stay in the H1 tag. So I'm going to click on it. I'm going to click the drop down by heading, and I'm going to move that into an H3. Lastly, I have my table of contents here. A couple of things that tell me this is probably not a table of contents. The main one is it's at the end of the document, which is not where a table of contents typically goes. But sometimes CommonLook Online, especially if this is, a short document, it's on page 2, might say, I think it's a table of contents. No big deal there. It's actually a list. So I'm just going to click on it and I'm going to change that to a list. And it'll now know, okay, we're going to read this out as a list and it's not a table of contents. Okay, easy as can be. Everything is now tagged correctly. I feel good about the tags that we have here. There are a couple of things I want to call out though before we're done. The first is this connections button. So we don't actually have anything to connect because this is dealing with elements that span multiple pages. So if this Jefferson County Deputy Sheriff Eric Bauman was actually the beginning of a list, which ended on page 2, I could click this connections button rather. I could check off this first piece of the list, and then I could go to the second page and check off the second piece of the list. So this is just going to allow me to let the system know, hey, these two things are actually not two separate lists. They are one and the same, just continued over 2 pages. So it doesn't come into play with this document, but if you have a document where you do have something spanning two different pages, it's relatively easy to go in here, choose connections, and connect those two. Lastly, before we move on, I want to just check on my reading order. So as you know, this is important because if I was a screen reader user and I open a document and it starts reading at this number 5 here, this paragraph, then I'm going to be like, whoa, wait, where are we? What's happening? What document is this? I never got a title. So I just want to click in here and make sure that the reading order is logical. It is super logical. It goes 1 through 10, and then we go to the next page and it is going to tell us it's 1 through 4 on this page as well. If for whatever reason I came in here and I was like, ooh, that actually doesn't look like the right reading order to me, I'm just going to hit this reorder button and it's going to empty out all of these purple boxes. And then I'm going to have the opportunity to come through and say, let's start here, and then let's read this one, and then let's read this one. I don't recommend doing it by the strategy I'm showing because, of course, this will be out of order for any of your screen reader users who are listening to the document. But that's just to show that it's really easy to click through and tell it how you want them to be read. So I'm going to go ahead and reset it because their reading order was much more logical than the one that I made up. And from here, this document looks good to go. I have done everything I needed to do. I will pause and just check the chat and make sure there's no questions. Does the online version check for plain language or color contrast? The Avery, keep me honest on this. The online version and CommonLook PDF actually do not check for color contrast. So you do need to use a color contrast checker on your own. Plain language, Avery, I don't know if you have feedback on whether CommonLook Online does that.
I'm not quite sure what you mean by plain language, so feel free to clarify, but Amy's totally spot on about color contrast. And the reason being is that CommonLook, none of our tools are authoring tools. So the short answer is if something was in trouble in terms of color contrast, CommonLook Online is not going to give you the opportunity to say, make your font a different color, for example, etc. Plain language, content being at a level that is accessible. You mean like in terms of reading level, for example, like 6th to 8th grade? Oh, gotcha. Sure. Good question. In short, no, right? Oh, interesting. I haven't heard that terminology, but I like it. Yeah. So there are best practices in the accessibility world, but as we know, every document has different audiences. So as a result, no, there's not going to be any sort of checkpoint that verifies that for you. But again, that's something that would occur in the authoring level of a document, not necessarily something I'd be tackling using CommonLook Online or any other tools. Good question.
Yep, those are both things that you want to do externally. Stephanie, for the sake of time, I'm not going to demo a table in CommonLook Online. We do offer CommonLook Online training. I offer it every other Friday, and then the training team offers it on opposite Wednesdays. So if you would like to see a table, I would love to see you at training. We can definitely go over it then. Page numbers and headers and footers can be tagged in CommonLook Online. It should identify them for you, but as you can see, if I click into a tag here, I can say, hey, this is a footnote or a page number, and I can let it know that it should artifact that appropriately. Okay, for the sake of time, because I know that I am leaving Avery to demo two pretty hefty tools, I'm going to go ahead and end my review. And it's going to say, are you sure? Yes, continue. And it is going to convert my document to my accessible PDF output. So I am going to, in just a second here, when it's done thinking and doing all the hard work that I don't have to do in CommonLook PDF, it is going to pop this out for me. And as you can see, I am going to get two files. The first, I'm going to be able to download my accessible document that we've just created. And then the second is I'm going to get a validation report. So this is just going to say, hey, this is how we did on the document. These are the changes that are made. These are the things that maybe still need to be addressed or looked at. I highly recommend downloading your validation report and giving it a quick glance over, because CommonLook Online will reliably get your documents 85 to 100% accessible. So it's not necessarily going to hit the 100% clean every time mark. And that is, I tell people, I'm not a lawyer, but I tell people 85% is probably going to be pretty good for most of your documents. It's going to get the information across. Your screen reader users are going to be able to digest that information. So it is up to you to make a judgment call here of, okay, am I good with the document that we created and put out here? Or do I feel like there's more tweaking that needs to be done? If you decide, you know what, there's actually something that we missed here and I want to tweak it, I want to make sure that my screen reader users are able to get that information, then I recommend downloading your document here, taking it to CommonLook PDF, and finishing any unfinished pieces of your document there. And Avery will talk about how we're going to do that. So I'm going to click finish. And last thing I will show before I turn it over to Avery is I have my CommonLook Online demo doc here. And so if I had forgotten to download it at that past step, I could just click download here and it will let me either download the accessible output or the validation report. So you can always come back. I mean, not always. They're stored for about 6 months, roughly. Oop, goodness. But you can always come back and revisit those documents that you've already done. Okay, I am going to turn it over to Avery. If there are any more questions about CommonLook Online, feel free to put them in the chat and I will try to answer them in the chat, or I will follow up with you. And if you want to sign up for CommonLook Online, you haven't already, I highly recommend it. As you can see, it's pretty easy. So let me know if that's the case and I will make sure that we get you that information.
And we do have a few more
Avery,
questions in
over
there.
to you.
Yeah, I
I'm
appreciate
going to go
it.
through and answer these now.
Yeah, I see some of those coming in. Awesome ones. I am also keeping an eye on chat, so if anything comes up, I'll do my best to address it as we go. Amber, in short, no. Excel has a bunch of inherent limitations. We can dig deeper on that, but no. It says accessible as Excel allows, but I wouldn't tell someone that is an accessible Excel file or an accessible file in general. And Kirk's asking a great question, which is in regard to scanned PDFs. And one of the things that comes up a lot about scanned PDFs is they're a problem because they come through as one giant image, right? So CommonLook Online does have some built-in OCR capabilities, but I would always recommend that folks use OCR externally. OCR being optical character recognition that's built into tools such as Acrobat. I'm pinging it on my screen now, if you can see that. So typically I recommend we run OCR separately, just because it's not a perfect science and we are not an OCR tool, but there is some capability built into that tool. And the longer question I saw from Josh, I appreciate that. I think I'll cover some of that today. But in general, I'll try to blanket statement this as much as possible. First of all, Josh, incredibly detailed question. Love it. Safe to say I was not expecting that. Love it. In short, this will all change when PDF 2 comes out. So keep that in mind, Josh. But the argument, there are arguments for having more than one H1 or even using the title tag as one. So I won't get too deep into that, but just know that the best practice scenario is entirely geared towards how assistive technology interprets the content. So it's not a perfect science in that regard, but I can certainly dig deeper, Josh. If you want to talk shop, you can always reach out to me or Amy. We can dig a little bit deeper. But yeah, so I'm going to dive into two tools today, the first of which will be CommonLook PDF, and the second of which will be CommonLook Office. I think CommonLook PDF, while it can be dense, is a great jumping off point from where Amy left us. Amy said candidly that CommonLook Online will not give you, in most cases, a 100% accessible document, just by virtue of the limits of that tool and it being what we sometimes described as a hammer as opposed to a power tool, right? So it gets the job started, but in large capacity, we need to lean on some more specific tools. Now, CommonLook PDF, which is the tool I'm opening right now, it's a plugin to Adobe Acrobat. CommonLook PDF is about as powerful as a remediation tool as you can create. Now, what that relies on is a general understanding of accessibility or a willingness to at least figure out a little bit about accessibility. And I say that with a whole lot of love because I teach classes literally every day of the week to different groups, whether they be small group, one-on-one sessions, things like that, all about how to use these tools. They vary in complexity from beginner level to much more in-depth advanced levels, and they really cover everything under the sun. So what I'm trying to say is, although Amy was exactly right in that there is a learning curve with CommonLook PDF, which is, again, the one I'm showing now, this is what I would consider our flagship program. It really is built on the idea of accessibility being the learning curve as opposed to this tool being the learning curve. So if that makes any sense, right? I would say half my class is spent teaching about accessibility, such as what is a heading 1 or why figures require alternative text or what tags go into a list, for example, right? It is not something that I assume that people know, and it's not something that I assume that you need to memorize. So as a little bit of taste, as a taste of that, right? Before I kick it off, I will just very briefly show, we have loads and loads of resources. Amy touched on a lot of them. One of them is our knowledge base. And let's say, for example, you just took a class with me all about list tagging, and you need a quick refresher a couple days later. You can always jump into our knowledge base and find an article all about tagging lists in CommonLook PDF. Now, we have a few different softwares, which is why this CommonLook PDF donation is an important one. But just as an example, this is a very detailed step-by-step rundown, including screenshots, all sorts of links to other articles, depending on where you get stuck, or all sorts of stuff like that, that show you how to tag lists. So what I'm trying to say is I love it when folks come to our classes, right? Because they're free, right? I get awesome questions at them. And I don't want you to ever feel like you need to furiously jot down everything we say. This is always going to be here, great resources. And along those lines, if you got questions, anything under the sun, this is essentially our manual for how to use our tool. So along those lines, I do think there's a learning curve with this tool, but it is the most efficient remediation tool available, which is why it's so powerful. I will say this, as Amy mentioned, we also have a remediation team at our company that remediates, 40 hours a week. That's their entire job. We remediate for clients who are not actively learning to use our tool or using our tool like you all will be. And because of that, our tool is efficient, right? It is efficient for us as a remediation company, but also efficient because we give the same tool to clients such as you, right? So that's the short spiel. So thank you for those awesome questions. Now, very quick tour of what I'm looking at here. The majority of my screen is taken up by what we call the physical view. This is the same PDF that I had open in Adobe Acrobat moments ago. In the grand scheme of PDFs, this is still a relatively simple one, but it does show some of the main offenders, such as tables. I know we already got a question about that. Lists, these are the sorts of things that have intricate tagging structures that people rely on tagged accessibly in order for their content to make any sense. So that's where I see the actual document, assuming I'm a sighted reader. The left side of my screen is where these tags are. If you haven't heard that term before, you'll hear it a lot. It's our favorite vocab word. But basically, tags are how assistive technology shares this content with an audience. So if you're using a screen reader, for example, it is not reading the screen, right? It's actually navigating through these tag trees, or tag tree rather, and sharing that information. So if these tags are wrong or out of order or missing entirely, that's where you bump into issues. And that's why Amy spent so much time running through and correcting those tags that were incorrect or tagging things that weren't identified, right? Because these tags are the bread and butter of accessibility. Now, all the other tools we'll kind of get to as we go, but long story short, a lot of tools along the top. That's where we'll go to insert, move, manipulate tags of all shapes and sizes. The top right of my screen is where we'll eventually go to run against our standard check of choice. We do have a lot of flexibility in terms of which standard we use in this environment. And then the properties panel below that is currently blank because I don't have anything selected, but if I select a tag, it will show me all the properties of that. So again, before I dive in, the last thing I will gently say is a notable or realistic workflow would be taking any and all PDF documents through CommonLook PDF from the starting point, right? I can totally get behind that idea. Like I said, it's wildly efficient, very, very powerful. But as Amy showed in CommonLook Online, you can do a great deal of heavy lifting in CommonLook Online and use this as kind of a cleanup feature that kind of bridges the gap. So very different in terms of where they might fit into your workflow, given your current kind of experience level or comfort with this stuff. But really they work in tandem, right? They're allies, they're friends, they're buddies, right? All the above. Cool. So let's get started. Now, the very first tag in my tag tree happens to be a paragraph, and the second tag is the second half of that paragraph. Now, looking at the physical view of the document, this is the title of my document. This is something that I would, without hesitation, tag as a heading 1 or heading level 1. Essentially, headings get announced by assistive technology, so we want someone to know this is the title of the document, and this is how they get shared. Oh, and I did see part of your question, Josh. I won't go too in depth into your question, but you did mention that isn't the metadata where we would go to get document information? Yeah, totally. In some scenarios, that's enough, but not all assistive technology will share metadata innately. So it's worth noting that the tag structures within indicating what the title of your document is still an extremely powerful process and generally a best practice. So in this case, I have 2 paragraph tags that are wrong, right? This is the issue. Now, I'm going to show you the easiest way to do this first, and then we'll pick up the efficiency shortly. Essentially, the 4-step process that we teach on the very first minute of our very first, most basic PDF remediation course is the process of highlighting something, tagging it, pushing it, and cleaning it. So I'll walk you through that shortly, and I promise it'll click in no time. Essentially, I just highlight the content that I want to select in the physical view. With that content selected, I can then navigate to the tag that I want to create. So in this case, I go to the Insert Tag tab and jump in and select the H1 button, because as I just alluded to, this should be tagged as a heading 1. So I go ahead and create that tag. Now, right off the bat, you might notice that the H1 tag was created, but it was placed inside of one of the older paragraph tags that we no longer need. This would be a great situation to do what we call push this content up 1 level. So I would move this H1 up 1 level so it's outside of the parent paragraph tag, right? Quite the tongue twister. So with that, right, I can right click on that H1 and push it up. Now, the fancy word we use is called level up, but the keyboard shortcut is Control P, which is why I tend to teach people it means push, right? Now, another piece of the puzzle I'll point out is that this tool is entirely accessible. So if I didn't want to, I could navigate this entire document without ever using my mouse. I could use entirely keyboard shortcuts. So I'll try not to lean too much on them today, but just know that every single thing I do can obviously be done using keyboard shortcuts. So with that, I'll hit the level up button and it will now be front and center. It's now the first tag in the entirety of the tag tree, which is exactly where I want it to start. So far we have highlighted the content, tagged it as an H1, pushed the H1 up 1 level, and the last thing I'll do is clean up the empty P tag that is left behind. There's a few ways I can do this. I'll just use the delete key on my keyboard and knock it right out. So in short, right, I highlighted this content, I tagged it, pushed it, cleaned it. You can really do that for anything, right? And I mean that slightly jokingly, because sometimes there's extra steps or not as many steps as all 4 of those, but I really want to stress that it's sometimes that simple, right? I get questions all the time. Oh, Avery, how do I tag a list? Oh, Avery, how do I tag a table of contents? How do I tag a new paragraph, a new figure, a new this, that, or the other, right? And the short answer is highlight what you want and tell it what to tag it as. And then sometimes you have extra things, such as you have to add alt text to your figures or things like that, right? But in general, that's a really great 4-step process to get you started, right? That's what Amy's tattoo says on her forearm. If you saw highlight, tag, push, clean, that's it. So with that, we'll move right on. Now, the next tag is something we see all the time, and some of you eagle-eyed viewers out there might see this too. Based on the questions, I already know that many of you are pretty well versed in this stuff. So pop quiz. Why might this be tagged as a table? Why might this be tagged as a table, right? Any thoughts as I throw the question out to 125 people all at once, which is a massive, oh, even more than that. Smart, Josh. See, Josh has got all the keyboard shortcuts. Multiple columns, right, Taryn? You are on the ball. 10 points to Gryffindor. Love it. Exactly. So exactly right, y'all. The general idea is the author, bless their heart, might not have really known how to make a column in Microsoft Word, for example. So what they did is they put it into a table, tried to get a little bit sneaky, make it white or transparent, something like that, and it's suddenly gone. Sorry, okay, just making sure. I lost everyone's video. Let me know if you lost my audio, but okay. All right. Sorry about that. So yes, you're exactly right. Basically, the author didn't quite know what they were up to. Sadly created a table tag. Now, the problem is that if I were listening to this using assistive technology, such as a screen reader, this would be shared as a 2-column table, which is not only wrong, but it's blatantly misleading, right? We want to give someone the same experience as they would have with as a non-sighted reader to a sighted reader, right? That's the general idea. So in this case, I would want to break this table down. Super simple process, super fancy word. It's linearize, right? Linearize table. It essentially means break down the table. So I can break down this table, and now CommonLook will spit out a figure tag and a handful of paragraphs, right? That's the general recipe. Now, those situations are better served at the source level. So maybe let's not create layout tables to begin with or presentation tables to begin with. But if you do, this is an easy way to solve the problem. Now, for those of you who do mess with this stuff regularly, you will be familiar with the term alternative text, or alt text for short. Essentially, figures and other graphical elements require alt text to tell someone what an image or graphic is actually of. In this case, I would simply select the figure tag, go into the alt text down here, and add alt text. I can say something like a band playing on stage. And there you have it. Now, it's worth noting that if you had this stuff in the source file, like if you had alt text in your Word file and then you bring it over into PDF, this will still be here. I'm not going to ask you to be redundant and duplicate your efforts, but if you don't have it, it's certainly there. Cool. Now the next 4 stops are just paragraphs, very run-of-the-mill, very basic, but they just run from the right column top to the right column at the bottom. And the last paragraph I'll go ahead and open up just because I want to show you all how far we've come. So in short, everything above this paragraph is taken care of. Everything below it, I still need to give attention to. Now, I hope this is clear because I'm talking probably way too fast, but the general idea is this is not designed to be training. If you come to some of our trainings or use our online modules, I promise I talk much more slowly. It's a little bit more casual and laid back, so please don't feel overwhelmed by that. But just think big picture today. Big picture, the goal is understanding where CommonLook PDF fits in terms of its workflow. And right now, right, creating this paragraph tag and accurately making sure that the tags are correct all above it and below it are all good to go. Now, below that, we have a paragraph tag, which should be tagged as a heading 2. And I would say this is a heading 2 because it's a subsection of the overall document. It's a subsection of the H1, for lack of a better term. Now, in many cases, I can lean back on the 4-step process that we already discussed, highlighting, tagging, pushing, and cleaning. But that's 4 steps. And your friend Avery, very lazy. I have branded it as efficiency, but I'm lazy, right? That's the general idea. A faster way to do this is to adjust this paragraph by simply going to the convert tag and converting it to be an H2. Now I have an H2 ready to rock and roll. That's my new point of reference. So I'll open it, close everything above it, and we can continue on chugging. Taryn's asking a great question, which is, do you think it's better to start with order or then review order at the end? Like, do you do reading order differently or separately rather than tags? And I want to be clear, exactly what I'm trying to articulate is I do them both at the same time, right? Let's say that this H2 was untagged, right? And this H2 is no longer here. Well, I would not proceed past this H2 without first tagging it. So I would adjust my settings to grab the untagged content, grab it, and then create my H2 just like that, right? So Taryn, it's an excellent question. And I get that question a lot, which is, well, we kind of separate our processes and it's far more efficient to do it as you go. It's my way of kind of giving the thumbs up as I move my way down a document. Cool. Now, the next piece of the puzzle, I separated 2 paragraphs so I can grab both of them and actually merge them together. All you have to do is select 2 tag types and then hit Control M on your keyboard or hit the merge tag button, and it will drop them right into the spot that you need as a singular tag. And I think that's an important distinction, right? When we create content, there's sometimes not always great control over how a source document type gets spit out as a PDF. For example, Microsoft Word's job is not to create an accessible PDF file. So sometimes we're doing a lot of damage control. And these sorts of splitting of tags is very, very common and very, very standard, but something that CommonLook just knocks out instantaneously. Now, I did get a question to talk about tables in CommonLook Online, so I'll dig a little bit deeper today into this table. Still not as dense as we could. Actually, I think we have an advanced class class coming up in January that we talk about tables if you're curious and want to dig even deeper. But the general idea is that with a table tag, if you don't have one, you can create one. I created one before today's demo just to show it to you pre-made in the interest of time. But once you have your table editor, this is how the table is created, right? Basically, things to point out here are that if I select a cell in this table, such as this day cell, it shows me it in the physical view and also shows me that TD or table data tag in the tags tree. Now, this is wrong for any of you who have worked through a table before. Essentially, these need to be tagged as column headers and or row headers, and they need to be linked in order to make our lives a little bit easier in some tables. So I'll just quickly do this. Again, not designed to be training, just showing you what it can do. So I can grab all of my column headers and choose our column header button. I can then grab all of our row headers, choose our row header button. And then if I want to, if I'm feeling crazy, I can even link all of my cells to their appropriate headers. So for example, $15 is now linked to child and Wednesday, because that's the relationship between a child ticket on the Wednesday day of the week, right? $90, for example, is the cost of a 4-pack of tickets on Thursday. Now, I'm getting a little bit into the weeds. I don't want to scare you off, but I'll just say this. For those of you who did ask about tables, just keep in mind, we remediate documents all day, every day. So if you can dream it, we can do it, right? This tool has the capability of knocking it out, right? If I needed to adjust the size of a cell or make something taller or smaller or wider or move something to a different cell location, you can do all of that within this tool. And quite frankly, I just tagged or corrected the incorrect tagging of this table in like 3 or 4 keystrokes very, very quickly. Is it best to utilize a table for a signature block? No, I would, you mean like a set of multiple signatures? We usually lean on them signatures being tagged as figures and then the actual text beneath them being tagged as paragraphs. But if they're actual interactive forms that have been filled in with like electronic signatures, then that's a different story. They would want to be tagged as forms. So good question, Don. Kind of in the weeds for today, but I'm not trying to push your question away. That's a great one. Would you please restate the fee you have for your remediate documents? Yeah, Amy will help you out, Don. Good question. Cool. So next stop is an H2 for location. I like that. It was tagged appropriately. Then I'm left with 4 paragraphs, which unnecessarily were split into 4, right? This looks like one paragraph, but it's unfortunately broken into 4 lines. Super simple. Again, I just grab all 4 of them, hit Control M on my keyboard, and now they're merged into a singular paragraph. And again, this is why it's important to articulate tag accuracy, because if these were read as 4 individual paragraphs, sure, it wouldn't be the end of the world, but it would give someone an incorrect understanding of what exactly we're getting into if they're reading this content. Now, okay, I've been trying to keep things relatively light, but I will dig a little bit deeper into this list because I think this is one of the main offenders in terms of frustration when it comes to document accessibility. For those of you on the call who this is the first time you're hearing about a lot of this, then just gloss over this point. But I will say this, list structures in the world of PDF tagging accessibility have very specific substructures. For example, a list tag is needed in your document, but not only that, your list tag needs to be made up of list items, or LIs for short, and within each and every list item, you have labels and L bodies, right? These are something that are innately required for accessible lists. Now, you could make all of those manually here in CommonLook PDF. It would still be relatively fast, but this is what I want to draw attention to. CommonLook PDF is a manual remediation tool. With that said, it will use automation in any possible situation to make your life easier, right? I will not today, Patricia, good question, sorry. In short, how we can tag this appropriately would be to lean on our 4-step process that we discussed earlier. Highlight the entirety of that list, then navigate up to the Insert Tag tab and go to Generate List from Selection. And just like that, my list is created. Now, let's dig a little bit deeper because I told you that these lists can be a little bit funky. If I open up this list, you will see automatically have I created 4 list items. Within each of those list items, I have a label, which points to the actual number 1, 2, 3, 4 in this list, and the L body, which points to the actual body of stuff in this list, right? So what I'm trying to point out here is that you don't need to know anything and everything about accessibility to use this tool, because CommonLook Office will do a CommonLook PDF, excuse me, will do a tremendous amount of heavy lifting for you. CommonLook just created a list tag as well as 4 list items, 4 labels, and 4 L bodies, all with a singular click. That is 13 accessible tags that are required to meet compliance requirements, all with a singular click. And again, this list is crazy simple. I totally get that. You're thinking, I got crazier lists. Come to my job, come to my desk and do some of those. But again, this can handle all sorts of complicated lists, and it's something that the tool is really, really strong with handling. Okay, next up is a paragraph. We then got a handful of figures, and a paragraph wraps up our time. Now, one thing I'm going to do here, I am going to show you what happens if we fail something. So in this case, I left this figure without alt text. Figures require alt text. Over here, there is no alt text. All the others, I already added alt text to. So last thing I'll do is create a document tag that's required under the standard, and I will choose an accessibility standard of choice, right? Essentially, I'll keep it light today. WCAG or WCAG 2.1 is the most widely used standard across North America, so that's the one I'll lean on. But of course, the other ones are here as well. I can choose the standard and run a full
Just a
check.
really quick note, Avery,
Yeah.
just for everyone on the line, WCAG 2.1 AA is the standard that HB 211110 references.
Perfect.
So
I'll run that one. Thank
that
you,
is the
Amy.
one you should run.
Love it. Love it. Lean on that. Lean on. Trust Amy. Don't trust me. Okay. So with that, you run your 2.1 rundown and go ahead and run a full validation. Now, this can feel like a lot, especially if you haven't spent much time tackling accessibility before, but CommonLook is designed to help you break this down. For example, the very first issue that I have here is asking about needing alternative representation for a figure. That's something I need to adjust. The next result is telling me I don't have alt text on this image. That's something I need to pay attention to. But some of them down below are asking about forms if they relate to this document, or if your list is tagged properly. And these are automatically marked as not applicable and passed because I don't want you wasting any time with them. So I'll change my results to only show failures, and we'll start there. The very first and only failure I have is the fact that this figure does not have alternative text, right? I left this blank on purpose in the interest of time, but I wanted to show you what happens if something goes wrong. CommonLook will then bring you through step by step the process of fixing that issue. So WCAG 2.1 is the standard that this is a violation of, and it tells me exactly what I have to do. I have to provide alt text for the given figure. And I can choose next to bring me through the next step of my fix wizard. It asks what type of text I want to provide. Alternative text is going to be my go-to. And then the final option asks me for step 3, which is my alt text. Now, in this case, this alt text should be populated as something like the logo for radio station, and I can type all that out. I'll leave that blank for now. Radio station, yada, yada, yada. Now, if I hit finish, keep an eye down here in the bottom right of my screen as the alt text populates for me, fills in that space for me right there. All right. So Jennifer's asked a good question. Should I run against other standards? No harm in that. But as Amy said, your legal requirement could be WCAG 2.1, which is an easier standard to meet than PDF UA. But the process is exactly the same. So with that, y'all, I would then spend the next couple of minutes working through my warnings and user verifications because there certainly are some. But I'm just going to move through those instantly just in the interest of time today and call this document done. There's a few things that you can generate when you're using CommonLook PDF, one of which is an accessibility report. Amy showed something similar as an output for CommonLook Online. This is a little bit more in-depth in an HTML format, but I can also save my PDF and be done at this point. So as you saw there, the process is much more manual. It required a little bit of knowledge of accessibility, but this really is an all-encompassing power tool for anything remediation oriented. So I want to drive that point home. If we're talking big workflow, CommonLook Online is a great starting point, can do a lot of the heavy lifting, but CommonLook PDF also a standalone, wildly powerful tool, but can pick up the slack that CommonLook Online does when it doesn't get you to quite 100% compliance. So that's the spiel there. Now, the next piece I'm going to talk about in the last couple minutes I have is just CommonLook Office. I'm going to keep this super light, but the most important thing for me is I want you to understand when we use CommonLook Online. And that is if you are working with a source file that starts in Word or PowerPoint and your desired output is an accessible PDF. What I mean by that is that this document, this is the one I like to showcase because it has some main offenders that we bump into a lot. Let's say I'm working on this document in Microsoft Word. I can then open up CommonLook Office and tell CommonLook Office which standard I want to meet. Now, WCAG 2.0, a little bit outdated, so in this case, you all might want to use WCAG 2.2. But you basically choose your standard, and then CommonLook Office scans through your document trying to find the violations of the standard or things that it needs your insight into. So what I'm trying to paint for you is the picture of when we use what tool. CommonLook Online is a heavy lifter for PDFs. CommonLook PDF is an all-encompassing power tool for PDFs, and CommonLook Office, this one I'm showing now, is a very simple to use hand-holding software that takes you through the process of creating an accessible PDF that doesn't require manual remediation after the fact from your Word or PowerPoint starting point. So I'll just work through one or two checkpoints in this document just to show you what it kind of does. But essentially, it's going to ask you, hey, is this true? How can I fix this? Does this need attention? And then it's going to go to the next checkpoint. So again, you don't need to know anything about PDF accessibility in order to use this tool. I would say that this is one of the most powerful tools to put in the hands of someone who is brand new to document accessibility and is also working on Word or PowerPoint files. And again, I think the more exposure you have to this, the easier this becomes. We also have, massive offerings in terms of training that you can come to at any time and review and all sorts of stuff like that. But just know that it's certainly an option here. Does CommonLook Office work only in the desktop application or will it work in the browser? Good question, Alan. Awesome question. It only works in the desktop version of the tool. Because as far as I know, and I could be completely wrong on this, I don't use the browser version of 365, so maybe I'm missing the ball here. But I'm not aware of the plugin installation option for the browser version. I could be wrong, but that's that. I'll leave it at that, Alan. But if you have a more if you have another application, feel free to ping Amy or I. We could circle back on that. So just as a showcase, this is the first checkpoint. I'll maybe show one or two today. This first checkpoint has identified images within this Word file and has identified them. If they have alt text, it's asking me to verify the accuracy of it. And if it doesn't have alt text, it's asking me to provide it. So for example, this first image, which is the Allyant logo, has populated the auto-populated alt text that came from Microsoft Word. I like to leave this example in here because it's a bit of a funny one. Microsoft Word is doing this more and more nowadays. Basically, it says a purple and white logo, description automatically generated. Word does this a lot with their clip art too. So whatever. Long story short, what I'm trying to say is if you have an image, CommonLook Office will ask you for the alt text for that image. But you don't even need to know what alt text is. All CommonLook is asking is, hey, what's a textual description of this image? And we can go from there. It's also worth noting that if you're a little bit stumped in a particular checkpoint, you can click on this More menu, and it will bring you to a support page specific to this checkpoint with all sorts of screenshots, step-by-step instructions, all sorts of stuff like this. So in this case, I'm going to change the alt text to be something like the Allyant logo. And I'll go ahead and leave it there. Now, it is worth noting that if you're working on images that happen to be mathematical formulas, or if you're working on purely decorative images, CommonLook Office can handle those as well. So I'll go to the next task, and it brings me to the next image in my document, which is a obviously very important graph. So maybe my alt text here could be a bar graph showing winter rainfall. Let's see. Winter rainfall in inches, something like that, right? I'm keeping it light today. Of course, the author would have the most insight into what appropriate alternative text should be here. Now, if I hit next task, it would bring me to the next image in this document, but we actually only have two. So hitting next task is the same as hitting next applicable checkpoint, and we can dive right into that. Now, lists, just like we handled in CommonLook PDF, are really important in terms of substructure of tagging. Important note here is, again, you don't need to know what tags go into an appropriate or accessible list. All you need to do is answer the question that CommonLook Office is asking, which is this list properly identified? For example, this first list item points to the first item in this list. The next goes to the second, third, fourth, and fifth. So in short, yes, the author properly crafted this list, and as a result, this list will have no problem coming through accessibly when using CommonLook Office. Now, the second list we left in here on purpose because, as you can see here, there's something wrong with it. We see this a lot, maybe you do too. Essentially, we purposefully did not include item 3 in the list itself. It's separate from the list, which then makes things a little bit spicier, right? It's wrong is the short answer, but it makes it a little bit more challenging because the author wasn't perhaps on the ball when they made this list. Now, in this case, CommonLook has identified the two list items that will be put into the PDF, but as you can see, it's missing item 3. So in that case, I would jump into the actual Word file, back this content up one line, and then move it back down into the actual list using shift tabs and hard returns, things like that, right? Now, if I reload this checkpoint, and then open up this second list item, you will instantly see that the third list item is now part of that list. So what I'm trying to say here is that this is the process that CommonLook Office employs. It holds your hand through checking content, brings to your attention things that are wrong or need a little double check or to verify its accuracy of, and then it will ask you to make adjustments when necessary. Now, I'm not going to go through the rest of this document because there's a few other checkpoints such as links and tables and that sort of thing, but the process is very, very simple. I would have extreme confidence putting this into the hands of a fairly new accessibility professional who has semi comfort with Word or PowerPoint, and they'd be cooking with gas in no time is the short answer. So again, if I can summarize this, and Amy perhaps will jump in if I miss anything, the really important thing to think about today is what these three tools do in tandem. When you're working with final form PDFs, your only options are CommonLook Online and CommonLook PDF. CommonLook PDF being a very powerful, all-encompassing tool that has a learning curve, but CommonLook Online being a bit of a brute force tool that can get you to 85+% accessible. And that's obviously great in some scenarios. If you're working with Word or PowerPoint files, CommonLook Online, this one I'm very quickly showing now, is going to be a recipe for success. Now, they all work together. That's why we offer all of them, and they all have different, niches in which they live. But collectively, just know that we have loads of resources for all of them, loads of trainings available, and if you only have a handful more months with this available to you, please, please, please take advantage of them, all the resources, and we'd love to get you up to speed and running as quickly as possible. So I'll turn it back over to Amy and the far more important people than me here on the call, but thank you all for being good sports, and thank you for the awesome questions.
Thank you so much, Avery. Thanks for the demo. I have a couple quick little things. The first is I should have mentioned while I was demoing, and Sharon caught it in the chat. Thank you, Sharon. If you are a state agency looking to use CommonLook Online, you do need to go through a testing process with OIT and their solutions engineers before you can do that. If you have questions about kicking that off, shoot me an email. We can do that together. There were a lot of questions in the chat. I think I got most of them. If there are any remaining questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm here to help. And I think that's it from me. I see that there's still a couple questions in the chat, but Sharon, anything else from y'all?
No, I don't think so. I
Do
can
we
go
want to
ahead
launch
and
our
launch our
poll?
poll question if you
All
want
right.
to show that last slide that we have,
Oh,
and
yes, I can do
how
that.
people can get hold of us if they have any of those further questions.
Absolutely. All right, there we go. There's our contact info. If you'd like to jot any of that down. And then we didn't cover it today. I know we have Mark Lind on the phone. We do have some other tools that can help you from a digital perspective. So we can do testing on your vendors to ensure that they're accessible. That is a free service. And then we also can help you with your website. So that is a piece of the law as well, is to ensure that your website meets all of the WCAG standards that it needs to. If you have questions on that, Mark Lind, who is here on the line, and also his contact info is on this slide. He is a great person to go to ask about those things.
Absolutely.
So you can always email me too.
All right. And here we are.
Okay. Sounds like most people have done some documents and website remediation, which is great. Congrats on getting started. If you haven't gotten started, reach out to me. Let's do it together. And if you're in the 5% that are all caught up and just in maintenance mode, congratulations. Tell us your secrets.
Diligent hard work, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure that it was hard to get there. Okay, well, I think that's it from us. I'm going to stay on the line in case any other questions pop up. Otherwise, thank you all so much, and we look forward to working with you.
Yes, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. As I was saying earlier, please don't hesitate to contact any of us with any of those questions. We'll be back next month with Grackle Docs to showcase their Google accessibility software. In the meantime, please go to SIPA's newly revamped website at sipa.colorado.gov to subscribe to our monthly newsletter to keep up with these upcoming events and news, find other services that we can help you procure, and that helpful accessibility and cybersecurity resources that we have. As I mentioned in the chat quite a bit, we will have this webinar uploaded to our YouTube channel in just a bit, as soon as we can get it processed and uploaded. And we will also be sending out that survey. So please fill that out for us so we can keep making these webinars relevant and informational and the topics that you want to see. Thank you again for being here today. We really appreciate your time and we wish you all a wonderful day and holiday.
Thank you so much.